So, ladies and gentlemen, today on Remote Control, we're going to take a quick look at the rise of what was later called the most important comedy discovery of the 1980s. Of course, we're talking about the superstar and multi-talented actor Eddie Murphy. Now, in 2020, Eddie Murphy was a known name. He's been, having big hits since he joined the movie corps in the mid 1980s. Everything from the Nutty Professor series to various multiple parts, various black comedies, black dramas. He's always brought the money. You look at Beverly Hills Cop. The continuation is going on right now as well with different sequels that are in the planning stages. Now, Eddie Murphy kind of lucked out. Now, they call him the savior of Saturday Night Live. That's where his big break was. And it was a weird series of events that led to him being discovered because he was doing like kind of stand-up and independent stuff before he ended up on Saturday Night Live. And I'm going to go a little bit of the history. A lot of people don't know, and a lot of people basically have stretched the truth or haven't expanded on the truth. But this all happened because Lorne Michaels left the show due to reasons seen and unseen before the 1980-81 season. Now, before this happened, when Eddie Murphy made that fateful phone call that led him to be Saturday Night Live, we'll get into that in a second. 80-81 was a terrible year. The series was not doing well with the new cast. A lot of people wrote the show off. A person by the name of June Dumanian took over the show for season 6. And you got to understand the great cast from 1975 on, except for Chevy Chase, were leading away on Saturday Night Live for years. Bill Murray, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Lorraine Newman, Gilda Radner, Garrett Morris, all the great players. And any replacement of this would have to be as good or better than that cast. And that was probably the best ensemble cast beside the Kids at the Hall in Canada in the 1990s, which will actually be part of a future podcast. We're going to get into that a little bit. Now, when Jean took over, or Dumanian, she hired a completely new cast and new writers, but it dropped in the ratings and dropped in what he called approval from the critics. Now, Lorne Michaels, who had left as the producer, wanted to make future political guru Al Franken his successor. But of course, Al Franken, being the idiot he is at times, shot himself in the foot that in a Weekend Update segment on May 10, 1980, Franken decided to throw a big criticism of the infamous Fred Silverman. And the comedic skit really pissed off Silverman, and any hopes of Franken being the successor was thrown out the window. Now, Dumanian had been a talent scout for Saturday Night Live in the early days, and as one of the few members who remained with the group after season 5. Now, in the fall of the year, she did accept executive producers, but NBC decided to bare bones the show by cutting the budget by 65% from what was then $1 million an episode to $350. And if you know Saturday Night Live, there's a lot of people behind the scenes, a lot of investments needed for shows. Dumanian took 2 months to get a new cast, and the first episode, actually, they changed the name of Saturday Night Live to Saturday Night Live 80 in the opening credits. It was a late start to the season, November 15th. Now, it featured an all-new cast, like I said. Charles Rocket, who he tried to make a big star, but he had very little, charisma or appeal besides the appeal he maybe had to producers. Denny Dillon, who was a bit player in Saturday Night Live before. The great Gilbert Gottfried, which at the time wasn't the star he is now. Gail Mathias, Joe Piscopo, and Ann Risley rounded out the cast. Now, the first female black cast member, Yvonne Hudson, was hired as well, and she was hired as a feature player, but not a full-time member. But get this, Eddie Murphy, who was a very bold person, he called Lorne Michaels' cousin, Neil Levy, who was a talent coordinator on the show, and he said, listen, I'm 19 years old, I want you to give me a shot. I'm a funny guy. I'm telling you, I can bring it. And initially, he was rejected because, according to reports, the black cast member for the show had already been chosen. Now, Murphy pleaded with Levy that he had several siblings banking on him, did the guilt trip, getting a spot in the show, and Levy finally auditioned him and recommended to Dunamanian. Actually, Dunamanian was a big supporter of Murphy, and he advocated for him with the network, and he was brought on as a feature player. Now, the big change when Murphy emerged, the initial episode, Elliot Gould, who did have a Q Factor at the time, and it was on the original cast shows of Saturday Night Live a few times in a few episodes. There was sort of like what you call a parallel universe type skit, where basically saying, that this season is doomed, and basically saying the cast is in a bunch of no names, and it's they were saying bad predictions. But what was really bizarre, Murphy really started to emerge a little bit later on. There was an episode with the great Malcolm McDowell, and which had Eddie Murphy's non-speaking network television debut, and in a skit called "In Search of Their Negro Republican." Now, he even a non-speaking role, he stood out. And the next week, Murphy advocated sort of like you see the young players on Saturday Night Live now. He said, "Give me part of the Weekend Update," and his first appearance on Weekend Update as sort of a guest commentator went over really well. And in the following episode, he, which was hosted by Ellen Burstyn, he continued to gain slight momentum. By that time, he was made a full cast member by episode 7. But get this. Everybody that was in the new cast was not considered a star. Eddie Murphy was brought in by Levy, the cousin of Lorne Michaels, basically saying, this guy was bugging me, I'll give him a shot. The person that they didn't expect to do anything with the show, Dunamanian, advocated for Eddie Murphy. So it was a weird series of events. It was all the shit going on behind the scenes that the show was not going to exist for too much longer, and all of a sudden, So with Dunamanian gone very soon after, by 1981, get this, there was a knockoff Saturday Night Live called Fridays on ABC. It was getting beaten by the ratings, and that really pissed off NBC. Now, it was nearly cancellation, and now Saturday Night Live was given one more chance when Dunamanian was fired, and the great Dick Ebersol was hired to replace him. Now, he was responsible for bringing in Lorne Michaels in '75, and he was given a task for bringing in new life. Now, his first week, Ebersol fired Gottfried, Risley, and Rocket, replacing him with two former SCTV actresses and actresses, and Robin Duke and Tony Rosato. And Tim Kazurinsky as well, great comedian who did a lot of kind of nerd comedy, was very good. And at the end of the season, he cleaned the whole friggin' house. He got rid of everybody that Dunamanian had put in, except for Murphy and Piscopo, because they were, they were had a good chemistry, and we all know the great, duets they did through the years, Sinatra and Stevie Wonder and all that, tremendous. Now, Ebersol originally wanted to bring in John Candy and Catherine O'Hara from SCTV. Candy turned down the offer, and Rosato joined, of course. Catherine O'Hara from Schitt's Creek and SCTV, they wanted to bring her in, and she accepted, but he changed her mind. And Robin Duke was brought in because O'Hara suggested it. Now, two young female actresses, Emily Prager and Laurie Metcalf, joined as feature players. Laurie Metcalf, of course, from Roseanne. But they were not retained after first appearance. And after the season ended shortly, Dylan and Matthias were fired, and left Piscopo and Murphy as the only ones left. Now, it was completely a messed up year, 80-81, but the thing is, it wasn't canceled. But But what really saved him actually was the fact that there was a writer strike in between the middle and the finale of the season. The last of the season was called off, like what do you call a reboot. There were no computers like they are now for a reboot, but they were saying, listen, we got Eddie Murphy, we got Piscopo, we got everybody ready to go for a new season. We're giving them more chance. Now by fall '81, Piscopo and Murphy, really took over the show, and his popularity, Eddie Murphy, restored ratings. Now he created numerous memorable characters in that '81-'82 season: Little Richard Simmons, James Brown Hot Tub, Buckwheat, and a very violent member of the cartoon generation. He took the Gumby toy and made him a kind of a vicious Jewish, cigar smoking irritant to everybody, who irritates everybody, is irritated by everybody else. Now, and that, of course, he did the Stevie Wonder. Everything was going really, really fast. Now, the '81-'80 season, Christine Ebersol was brought in, Mary Gross, and of course Bill Murray's brother, who was a former Saturday Night Live player a couple of years ago, Brian Doyle Murray. And again, Duke Kazurinsky and Rosato came back, and a whole bunch of new people were brought in: Gary Kroger, Brad Hall, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, later of Seinfeld, who later married Brad Hall, and Jim Belushi was brought in, who was John Belushi's brother, and it became like an Ebersol show, as we say. But Murphy's star rose up so quickly, it only lasted another 2 or 3 years before it went to the movies. But you look at the characters that Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, Velvet Jones, the pimp with a heart of gold who was training new prostitutes that were coming up. You look at the crazy prison poet, to Kill My Landlord skit, classic. You look at his ad-lib style. And there was one episode specifically that was 10 minutes short. He basically filled the last 10 minutes with part of his stand-up. Just tremendous. But you got to understand, when it comes to making big in entertainment, everybody got to have a break. When Christopher Plummer had that kidney stone in, Stratford, William Shatner, his understudy, went on stage. You look how Judy Garland was discovered. You look at people like, James Dean, doing a bunch of TV shows for years before he finally got that big break by hooking up with the right producers and the right supporters. Eddie Murphy was destined to be a star, but we never thought he would be at NBC because, as a lot of people already know, NBC was never a family network. Very straight-ahead drama, very straight-ahead comedy. But Eddie Murphy kept the tradition of Richard Pryor, Red Fox, James Gregory, all these great black performers. But he was what he called a ribald performer. If you would take Lenny Bruce's soul and put it into Bill Cosby, like with a little bit of satanic and a little bit of dirty language, that would be Eddie Murphy. Eddie was a studier of comedy. He understood the Jewish style of comedy. He understood slapstick. He understood the intelligence he takes. Now you got to understand, he's 4 decades on top as probably the best overall black entertainer of the last 40 years. When you say Eddie Murphy, you don't know what people might be into with Eddie Murphy. Like I said, could be Nutty Professor, his family movies, could be his romantic dramas, could be, like I said, Beverly Hills Cops, 48 Hours. He can do anything. The only person I can compare him with, if Jerry Lewis had a better personality and was more popular, it'd be Eddie Murphy. And I'm sorry that with Dreamgirls, he lost the Oscar. He should be an Oscar winner. And look what he did this year with these different comedy movies that are already out or will be coming out. But Eddie Murphy's talent was such, he saved a network, he made careers, he made people go back to the movies again. Not too many people would accept a black actor in a mainstream movie. Look in Beverly Hills Cops, that could easily be Bruce Willis, could easily be Jeff Bridges, easily be Don Johnson. but he made the movie himself. But he had that ad-lib style, and it influenced everything from In Living Color to Will Smith to kind of like, fans of Three's Company. There's a lot of Eddie Murphy's comedy that's family. A lot of it is dirty. A lot of it is intellectual. He still hasn't made, I think, hit his peak. There's still an option for him down the road. Who knows what they're going to do? And I honestly thought years ago he would become a talk show host a la Johnny Carson. But, he ran his own company. He's really dedicated to his family. He has to be. He has 10 kids. So, but what you got to understand, Saturday Night Live right now, this is garbage. In 2020 compared to what Eddie Murphy. When you see Eddie Murphy on the screen in 1982, 83, again, it was amazing. It was watching a beautiful figure skater. I don't know, watching Tyler Cranston in his prime, watching Elvis Stoico. Like every move was like art. And every word he said, you didn't know where the next joke was coming from. Sure, Piscopo helped him out quite a bit, Sinatra, Stevie Wonder. Piscopo wasn't a natural comedian. But I always wonder, like I said, if Belushi and Aykroyd would have stayed. But, movies was calling. But he is, to me, pound for pound, he's the best performer in Saturday Night Live history, because that's saying a lot. We've had some good performers. Dana Carvey is the only, and Phil Hartman too. Don't forget Phil Hartman. Mike Myers is just playing himself like he played in the Canadian shows. He just took his characters. Eddie Murphy, the best compliment I can give, he's the best member of SCTV and Kids in the Hall that was never a member of SCTV or Kids in the Hall. He would have fit in with any comedy troupe. My only regret, he's never done much television since. If Eddie Murphy had a weekly show, look at Wayne Brady. Why do you think Wayne Brady's so popular? He got aspects of Eddie Murphy. Will Smith is almost like Eddie Murphy is Will Smith. Will Smith used to get his leavings. Eddie Murphy wouldn't accept a movie, Will Smith would get it or be considered. The Rock owes a lot to Eddie Murphy, just Kevin Hart, goes on and on. He made being black not only proud, he made money. He was the original pimp. He was making money hand over fist. He was getting paid millions of dollars doing movies with, of all people, Dudley Moore. No matter who he put the movie in with, he would make money. And when people criticized him, said he had some bombs, well, I'm sorry, he had 30 movies that made tons of money and 3 or 4 were bombs. And but see, I get in trouble with members of my family, including my wife. I'm a big fan of Nutty Professor. And, he took back the word Hercules from Hercules and Newt in Canadian cartoons and made it important. Hercules, made it important again. So that's a little bit of the Saturday Night Live Eddie Murphy rise to power. He was the guy that took Frankenstein and a slab and rebuilt it. But with Eddie Murphy, he never really had an ego, and I tell you why. I saw sometimes how he held down the women in the original Saturday Night Live, and how he hold down the women at the Saturday Night Live too. Kate McKinnon and Cecily Strong are the only ones that stand out. But I find when Eddie Murphy was on, he was self-deprecating. He'd play himself. He'd play a different version of himself. And you look at his stand-up movie. He changed the rules, and like 5 years after his great stand-up movies, you still feeling trouble from the people. And when he said that white people would copy him, he's completely right. By the way, The Golden Child, a bomb, yes, but it still made money. That's what I'm talking about. Whatever he touched turned to gold. He go through the offices of the movie studios they're working for and said, okay, we're going to make $50 million on this. He was taking scripts left and right. Anyway, the only comparison is right now is The Rock and Will Smith, because sometimes they're money and most times they are. So on this Wednesday, waiting for a big storm coming in New Brunswick. A lot of the Saturday Night Live skits with Eddie Murphy are still available on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of cassette releases from the 90s that are available. Actually, I've donated some to libraries across the province, including Woodstock and Dalhousie and Hamilton. They could be still there. He was that good. Would Saturday Night Live be the Saturday Night Live it is without him? Probably not. The show would have been canceled. But now, because Lorne Michaels came back, that's another story for another podcast. And I don't think Lorne Michaels made Saturday Night Live. I really think the people made the show. And How could you go wrong if you have Chevy Chase, Belushi, Murray, Eddie Murphy, Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman? I mean, John Lovitz. Thank you very much. Anyway, so listen, I'm the best podcaster in Canterbury right now. Anybody wants to challenge my title, they can beat me at Meductic, and we'll have a podcast off. So in Canterbury, New Brunswick, I'm the podcaster you can trust. I'm the best and the worst at the same time. So that's an Eddie Murphy comment from years ago. He said I'm the best and worst actor out there. And I heard he's having maybe a possibly 11th child, which maybe he has to make all these more money to feed him. So have a good night. Bye.